The pen ran dry halfway through his signature. He looked up. The caseworker didn't offer another, just kept reading from the paper. Eyes on the desk. "Ask at the front desk," she said. He found a pen, finished signing. The date read March 15th, his 18th birthday. She slid a plastic bag across the table. 3 shirts, 2 pants, a toothbrush. Next to it, an envelope, $287. "That's everything." He walked out. The hallway stretched long and white, footsteps echoing on linoleum. At the glass partition, he stopped. His sister sat alone in the common room. 14. She looked up. She put her palm flat against the glass. He matched her hand on his side. "Son, you gotta go." The security guard's voice. He turned. Walked. Didn't look back. "If you're still here, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today?" Sometimes the smallest connections remind us we're never truly alone. The bus smelled of diesel and old vinyl. He sat in the back row, forehead against the window, watching towns shrink into farmland. Farmland into nothing. 4 hours, 3 transfers, the last bus half empty. End of the line. The driver didn't look back. He stepped onto cracked asphalt, a gas station, a feed store with a faded sign, a diner with 2 trucks parked outside. The woman at the feed store counter squinted at the paper he held out. "Henderson Place." She pushed her glasses up. "That's been sitting empty 10 years, maybe more. 3 miles out, past the Miller farm. Take the dirt road till it ends." He walked. The wind cut through his jacket. His shoes, old Nikes from a donation bin, weren't made for this. By the 2nd mile, the right sole had started to separate. The dirt road narrowed. Weeds grew high on both sides. No fences, no mailboxes, nothing saying anyone had been here in years. Then he saw it. A metal trailer sat in the middle of a clearing, rust bleeding down its sides like old wounds. 2 windows, both broken. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Weeds reached the bottom edge of the walls. He stood there. This was it. This was everything his grandfather had left him. He walked closer. Glass crunched under his feet. The door groaned when he pushed it open. Inside, mold, mouse droppings, a mattress with the stuffing torn out. But against the far wall, a wooden table, still standing. And on it, a metal toolbox coated in dust. He opened it. Hammer, screwdrivers, a handsaw with a wooden handle, nails in a coffee can, some rusted, some still good. Underneath the tools, a piece of paper, folded, yellow with age. His grandfather's handwriting, shaky but clear. "Land's paid off. It's yours. Do something with it." He read it twice, 3 times. The wind pushed through the broken windows. Somewhere above, something creaked the roof, or what was left of it. He looked up. 3 holes, big enough to see the sky turning orange through them. Winter was 8 weeks away, maybe less, and he had $240 left. He woke on the floor with his back screaming. Cold had seeped through the floorboards all night. His jacket, bunched under his head as a pillow, smelled of mildew now. Gray light pushed through the broken windows. He sat up, his spine cracked. His neck wouldn't turn right. The toolbox sat on the table where he'd left it, the paper with his grandfather's writing tucked back inside. He found a stub of pencil in the toolbox, tore a piece of cardboard from an old box in the corner. Started walking through the trailer. Roof 3 holes. The biggest one directly over where the mattress used to be. Windows 2 broken completely. 1 cracked. Door doesn't close. Gap at the bottom wide enough for his hand. Floor 1 corner soft, rotting. Dangerous to step on. No electricity, no running water. He wrote it all down. The list filled the cardboard. Outside, he found the well his grandfather must have used, a hand pump, rusted solid, a wooden cover half collapsed over the hole. He pumped the handle. Nothing. Pumped again. The metal groaned but didn't move. Back inside, he counted his money, $240. $47 already gone on bus tickets and a sandwich that was supposed to last 2 days, but lasted 1. He looked at the list, looked at the money. The roof had to come first. Everything else could wait. But if rain or snow got in, nothing else would matter. He put $200 in his shoe, the rest in his pocket, started walking toward town. 3 miles, the same road, the same weeds, the same wind cutting through his jacket. His right shoe flapped with every step, the sole separating more. By the time he reached the main street, his sock was wet from the ground. The hardware store sat between the post office and an empty storefront, paint peeling on the sign, Dawson's Hardware and Feed. A bell jingled when he pushed the door open. Inside narrow aisles stacked floor to ceiling, bags of seed, coils of wire, tools hanging on pegboards, the smell of machine oil and dust. Behind the counter, a man looked up from a newspaper, 60, maybe older. Reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, flannel shirt, sleeves rolled. Help you. He pulled out his cardboard list. I need to fix a roof, metal roof, got holes in it. The man. Mr. Dawson, according to the faded name tag, looked at him for a long moment, looked at the list, looked at his shoes. Henderson Place. He nodded. That roof's been leaking 20 years. Mr. Dawson folded his newspaper slowly. You fixin' it yourself? Yes, sir. You done roofing before? No, sir. Mr. Dawson stood, walked to an aisle without another word, came back with a small sheet of corrugated metal, a tube of silicone sealant, and a paper bag of roofing nails. That'll patch the worst of it. Won't be pretty, but it'll hold till spring if you do it right. He wrote numbers on a receipt pad. $47. He counted out the money, put the materials in the plastic bag he'd brought from the trailer. At the door, he stopped. Thank you, Mr. Dawson grunted. Not friendly, not unfriendly, just acknowledgement. The walk back took longer. The bag was heavier than he'd expected, the metal sheet awkward to carry. His shoulder burned by the second mile. At the trailer, he found a ladder behind the building wooden, 2 rungs missing. But it held his weight when he tested it. He climbed onto the roof. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun, oxidized to a dull brown. He could see where the rust had eaten through. 3 spots, the biggest one the size of his head. He positioned the patch over the first hole, held it with one hand, picked up the hammer with the other. The first nail went in crooked, bent halfway through. He pulled it out with the claw end. Tried again. The hammer slipped, caught his thumb instead of the nail head. Pain shot up his arm. He dropped the hammer, watched it slide down the roof, catch on a seam, stop. His thumb throbbed, already swelling. He picked up the hammer, put another nail against the metal, missed again. The nail skittered off the roof, lost in the weeds below. He sat back, looked at his hands, the right one shaking now, not from cold. 3 nails gone, nothing to show for it. The voice came from somewhere inside his head, the same voice that had followed him through 7 foster homes. You can't do this. You've never built anything. Kids like you don't learn how. He picked up another nail, positioned it carefully, held the hammer higher on the handle this time, the way he'd seen someone do once, somewhere. He couldn't remember where. Swung. The nail went in. Not straight tilted, maybe 15 degrees to the left, but it went in. the head pressed flat against the patch. He hit it again. The metal sheet stopped rattling. He sat there, looking at it. One nail, crooked, ugly, but holding. The sun touched the tree line. He drove in 5 more nails before the light got too dim to see, applied the sealant around the edges the way the tube instructions said. That night, he lay on the floor in the same spot. No water dripped through. He listened to the wind pushing against the walls, felt the cold coming up through the boards. His thumb still throbbed, his back still ached, but the roof held. He closed his eyes. If he could drive 1 nail, he could drive 2. If he could patch 1 hole, he could patch 3. If he could fix the roof, maybe he could fix the windows. And if he could fix the windows... He stopped himself, 1 thing at a time. Tomorrow, the 2nd hole. But somewhere in his chest, something had shifted. Small, almost nothing. He'd made something hold. In his pocket, the receipt from Dawson's Hardware. $47 spent, $193 left. Winter was 8 weeks away. And he still didn't know how he'd get water from that rusted pump. 2 weeks. The roof stopped leaking on day 4. Not pretty patches of mismatched metal overlapping like fish scales, but when rain came on day 6, nothing dripped through. He'd found plastic sheeting behind the feed store, in a dumpster, cut it into squares, nailed it over the broken windows with strips of scrap wood from the collapsed shed out back. The light inside turned milky, diffused, but the wind stopped cutting through. The well took longer. He walked to town 7 times in those 2 weeks, 3 miles each way. The library had 4 computers in the back corner, old monitors with sticky keyboards, free Wi-Fi, no questions asked. The woman at the desk, Mrs. Patterson, according to the nameplate, watched him the first few times, gray hair pinned back, glasses on a chain. She never said anything. Just nodded when he came in, nodded when he left. He watched videos on well pump repair, paused, rewound, watched again, took notes on the back of receipts. The pump needed priming, needed the leather gasket replaced, needed the handle joint oiled. He tried 3 times before it worked. The first attempt, the gasket didn't seat right. Water poured out around the seal. The second attempt, he cracked the housing, trying to tighten a bolt. Had to find a replacement piece in the junk pile behind the trailer, an old tractor part that almost fit. The third attempt, he got it right. He found a piece of leather in the toolbox, an old belt, cracked but still flexible. Cut it into a circle, fit it into the pump housing the way the video showed. Poured water down the pipe from jugs he'd filled at the library bathroom. Pumped, nothing. Pumped again. A gurgle. Air pushing through. He kept pumping. His arm burned. His shoulder screamed. Water sputtered out. Brown at first, thick with rust and dirt. He pumped until his vision blurred. The water ran clear. He stood there, watching it pour onto the ground. Cold, clean, coming from his well, his pump, his land. That night, he washed his face for the first time in 2 weeks, cupped the water in his hands, bent over the pump in the dark, felt it run down his chin and neck. He'd forgotten what clean felt like. The letter came on day 12. He'd left his name and the post office address with the caseworker before he left. A long shot. She'd looked at him like he was asking for something impossible. But there it was. White envelope, social services stamp in the corner, official channels, the caseworker must have approved it. His name written in handwriting he recognized. Careful letters, the way she'd always written. Even when she was small. He carried it back to the trailer without opening it. Sat at the wooden table, the afternoon light coming through the plastic-covered windows. His hands were shaking when he tore the envelope. One page, lined paper, torn from a notebook. I know you're out there somewhere. They told me you left an address. They said you're trying to make a place. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it's hard, but I know you. I'll wait. I believe in you. Lily. He read it 4 times. The words didn't change, didn't rearrange themselves into something less. They stayed there, blue ink on white paper, written by a 14-year-old girl sitting in a common room behind a glass partition. I believe in you. Nobody had ever said that to him. Not the foster parents who kept him for 8 months and then didn't. Not the teachers who passed him along to the next grade because it was easier. Not the caseworkers who rotated through his file like shift workers. He'd looked into shelters before leaving, transitional housing programs, job training. The wait lists were months long. The requirements needed documents he didn't have. The system had places for people like him, just never enough places, and never soon enough. This was what he had instead. A rusted trailer, a piece of land. And now, a letter. He folded it carefully, twice, 3 times. Put it in the toolbox, next to his grandfather's note. 2 people now. 2 people who thought he could do something. That night, he sat at the wooden table with a piece of cardboard and the pencil stub. The trailer was 1 room, 12 feet by 30, roughly. The mattress was gone. He'd dragged it outside and burned it. The smoke thick and chemical. He slept on a folding cot he'd found at the dump, springs poking through the fabric in 3 places. If Lily came, she'd need her own space, a room, even a small one, even just a corner with walls. He drew a line down the middle of the cardboard, made a square in the left corner, wrote Lily's room, 6 feet by 8, enough for a bed, a window, a door that closed. He did the math. Wood for framing, plywood for walls, a door, hardware, paint. Maybe, if there was enough left, $50 minimum, probably more. He had $193. Food cost money. The walk to town wore out his shoes. He'd patched the sole with duct tape twice already. Winter would need heating. The wood stove in the corner looked functional, but he hadn't tested it yet. Didn't know if the chimney was clear. He looked at the drawing, looked at the letter in the toolbox. For 2 weeks, he'd been thinking about survival, fixing what was broken so he wouldn't freeze, wouldn't starve, wouldn't have to go back. But this was different. This was thinking about someone else, making something not just functional, but livable. Not for survival, for her. Something shifted in his chest. Not happiness, that wasn't the right word. Something heavier. Something that felt like weight and warmth at the same time. He didn't have a name for it. He added to the drawing. A second line for where the wall would go. A small square for a window. Notes in the margin: need studs. Need hinges. Need something for floor. The light faded. He kept drawing until he couldn't see the pencil marks anymore. That night, lying on the cot, he didn't think about the holes he'd patched or the pump he'd fixed or the windows he'd covered. He thought about the letter. I believe in you. And for the first time, he let himself think that maybe he could be someone worth believing in. Outside, the wind picked up. The plastic over the windows rippled. He listened for leaks. Heard none. The roof was holding. The water was running. He had a plan on a piece of cardboard, but winter was 6 weeks away now, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought he'd been pushing down for days finally surfaced. He had $193. Lily's room would cost at least $50. Food and supplies through winter would cost everything else. The math didn't work. Something would have to give. The wind woke him at 2 a.m., not the usual wind, the steady push that rattled the plastic windows every night. This was different. This howled. He sat up on the cot. The trailer groaned around him. Something banged against the outside wall. Then again. Then scraped along the metal siding. Rain started. Not drops, sheets. He could hear it hitting the roof like someone throwing gravel. Then the dripping started. He scrambled off the cot. In the dark, he couldn't see where. He felt along the floor until his hand found wet. The northeast corner, where he'd patched the biggest hole. The water wasn't dripping anymore. It was streaming. He grabbed the bucket he used for washing the only container he had and shoved it under the leak. Ran to the window. The plastic sheeting was flapping. One corner torn loose. Wind and rain sprayed through the gap. He held the plastic with both hands, pushed it back against the frame. The wind pulled it away. He pushed again. Found a nail on the floor, drove it through with his palm. The plastic held for 3 seconds, then tore around the nail. Rain soaked his shirt, his pants. Ran down his face and into his eyes. The bucket overflowed. He emptied it out the door, came back. Already full again, as all night. That was how long it lasted. He ran between the leak and the window, emptied the bucket 9 times, 10 times. Lost count. Held the plastic in place until his arms shook. Found a board. Wedged it against the frame. Watched it slip and fall 3 times before it finally held. The wind screamed through every gap he thought he'd sealed. The trailer swayed on its foundation. He heard something tear metal on metal somewhere above him. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The wind dropped to a whisper. He stood in the middle of the room. Water covered the floor. An inch deep in the low spots. The cot was soaked. The wooden table had water pooled on its surface. His grandfather's toolbox sat on top. Dry, the only thing he'd thought to lift up in the chaos. He opened the door. The gray morning light showed him what the night had done. The northeast section of the roof was gone. Not the patch, the whole corner. A 4-foot section of metal had peeled back like a lid, folded over itself, hanging off the edge. He could see the sky through his ceiling. He walked around the trailer. A branch had punched through one of the plastic windows. The wood he'd used to reinforce the doorframe had cracked down the middle. The outhouse he'd been planning to fix had collapsed completely. A truck passed on the main road, half a mile away. He watched it disappear around the bend. First vehicle he'd seen out here in days, probably checking storm damage on the farms. He went back inside. Sat on the wet floor because there was nowhere dry to sit. The cardboard with Lily's room drawn on it floated past his foot. He picked it up. The pencil marks had blurred, but he could still see the lines. The square he'd marked for her window, the notes in the margin, now illegible. He set it on the table to dry. Then he counted his money, $193. Same as before. He walked to town, 3 miles in wet shoes, the duct tape peeling off now, his socks squelched with every step. The cold had teeth this morning. Mr. Dawson's store had a cracked window. A piece of plywood covered it from the inside. "Storm got you too." Mr. Dawson looked up from behind the counter. He nodded, pulled out his list. He'd written it on the walkover, on the back of his hand because he didn't have paper dry enough. Roof section gone. Maybe 4 feet? Need patch material. Screws. More sealant. Mr. Dawson read his hand. Read it again. "That's a bigger job than before." "I know." Mr. Dawson walked the aisles, came back with a stack of corrugated metal sheets, a box of self-tapping screws, 2 tubes of sealant, a roll of flashing tape. He wrote on the receipt pad, scratched something out, wrote again. $147. He had $193. That would leave him $46. For everything else, for however long winter lasted, he paid. Mr. Dawson put the materials in a cardboard box, paused. Hold on. He went to a bin by the door, came back with a pair of gloves, brown leather, worn at the fingertips, but no holes. These ain't worth much. Might as well. He looked at the gloves, looked at Mr. Dawson. Still at it. Huh? Mr. Dawson said. Thought you'd have quit by now. He didn't answer, just took the gloves. Storm hit everybody, Mr. Dawson said. Get that roof fixed before the next one. The walk back took longer. The box was heavy, awkward. He had to stop twice to rest his arms. When he got back, a white envelope was wedged in the doorframe. Mail carrier must have come while he was gone. The address was the post office box he'd set up that first week. The social services stamp in the corner. He set the box down, opened the envelope. Lily's handwriting again. Same careful letters. They say winter's going to be bad this year. The worst in a long time. Mrs. Rodriguez, she's my foster mom, now says they're predicting lots of snow. I hope you're staying warm. I think about you every day. Are you ready for winter? He read it standing in the doorway, water still dripping from the torn roof behind him. Are you ready for winter? He looked at the sky, gray, getting grayer. He looked at the roof, 4 feet of it missing. He looked at the $46 in his pocket. No, he wasn't ready, but he couldn't tell her that. He spent the rest of the day on the roof. The new screws went in easier than the nails self-tapping. They bit into the metal and held. He layered the patches, overlapping like shingles the way a video had shown him. Sealed the edges. Taped the seams. By sunset, the roof was whole again, ugly, mismatched, but whole. He climbed down, his shoulders burned. His hands were raw even through the gloves Mr. Dawson had given him. Inside, the floor was still wet. The cot was still soaked. He dragged it outside, leaned it against the trailer to dry. That night, he slept on the wooden table, his grandfather's table. It was hard and too narrow, and his back would hate him in the morning. But it was dry. He lay there in the dark, listening to the wind push against the walls. $46. 6 weeks until winter really hit. Lily had asked if he was ready. He thought about lying, writing back something hopeful, something that would make her feel better. But she'd know. She always knew when he was lying. The wind picked up. The new patches held. No dripping. He closed his eyes. $46 for 6 weeks. Food. Heat. Repairs. Whatever else the weather decided to throw at him, the math still didn't work. Hadn't worked before the storm. Definitely didn't work now. Something had to give. He just didn't know what was left to give. 3 weeks after the storm, the roof held. The patches hadn't leaked once, not even when the second storm came through smaller, but still enough to test what he'd built. The windows were covered now with real plastic, doubled up, taped at every edge. The door sealed properly after he'd rebuilt the frame with wood from the collapsed shed. He should have felt something. Satisfaction. Maybe progress. Instead, he woke up on day 21 and couldn't get off the cot. His arms didn't want to move. His legs felt like concrete. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, his ceiling, patched and ugly but solid, and counted to 10, then counted to 10 again. On the third count, he made it to sitting. His hands shook when he reached for his boots. Not from cold. The cold he was used to now. This was different. Deeper. He'd been eating 1 meal a day to stretch the food. Rice and beans. Bought in bulk from the general store. Cheap. Filling. Tasteless after the first week. $46 had become $28 after the last grocery run. He pulled on the boots, stood. The room tilted for a second, then steadied. The fence. He'd been meaning to fix the fence for days. The property line had posts leaning in every direction, wire sagging or missing entirely. It didn't matter for now, no animals, no crops, nothing that needed containing. But if Lily came, if she stayed, there should be boundaries, lines that said, "This is ours." He grabbed the post hole digger from the toolbox, walked outside. The cold hit him differently this morning, sharper. The sky was white, not gray, the kind of white that meant snow was coming. He could smell it in the air, that metallic edge. The first post went in wrong. He dug the hole too shallow. When he tamped the dirt around the base, the post wobbled. He dug deeper, hit a rock, pried it out, dug more, set the post again. Still wobbled. He pulled it out, started over. Halfway through the second attempt, the post hole digger slipped. The handle caught him across the knuckles. He dropped it, stood there, shaking his hand, watching blood well up from a scrape he couldn't feel. He used to be better than this. Faster, steadier. Something was running out. A truck engine broke the silence. He looked up. A beat-up Ford, brown with rust along the wheel wells, coming down the dirt road. He'd seen it pass before twice in the last week, heading toward the farms past his property. It slowed, stopped at the edge of his land. An old man got out. 70, maybe older, work jacket, dirt on the knees of his pants. He walked toward the fence line without hurrying. Them posts. He waited. Too shallow. The old man pointed at the wobbling post. "Ground's loose out here. Sandy. Goes down 3 feet before you hit clay." He looked at the post, looked at the hole he'd dug maybe 18 inches. "Go deeper," the old man said. "Ain't pretty work, but it's the only way they'll hold." He nodded. The old man turned, walked back to his truck, stopped at the door. "You're still here." It wasn't a question, more like an observation, like noting the weather or the time. "Yes, sir." The old man got in the truck, pulled away without another word. No goodbye, no good luck, just information delivered and gone. He stood there for a long moment, then he pulled the post out, started digging. Deeper this time, 2 feet, 2.5. His shoulders screamed. His hands blistered through the gloves. He kept going until he hit something harder, clay. Just like the old man said, the post went in, held firm when he pushed it. He set 3 more posts before dark. Each one took twice as long as he'd planned. Each one solid. That night, he sat at the wooden table. The cot was dry now, back inside. But he couldn't bring himself to lie down yet. The toolbox sat in front of him. He opened it. Took out Lily's letter, the most recent one, from after the storm. "Are you ready for winter?" He read the words. Read them again. Nothing happened. He waited for the warmth he'd felt before, that pressure in his chest, that thing without a name that made him want to keep going. The paper was just paper. The words were just words. "I believe in you." He folded the letter, put it back in the toolbox. His hands were still shaking. Hadn't stopped all day. $28. He had $28 and half a bag of rice and a fence that was 4 posts better than yesterday. The wood stove needed wood. He'd been collecting fallen branches, stacking them behind the trailer, but they were green. Wouldn't burn clean. He needed dry wood, cured wood, and that cost money he didn't have. Lily's room was still just a drawing on water-stained cardboard. No walls, no door, no bed for her to sleep in. He looked at his hands. The scrape from the post hole digger had scabbed over. His palms were calloused now in places they'd never been calloused before. 5 weeks since he'd left the social services building. 5 weeks since he'd put his hand on the glass. Lily was still behind that glass, still waiting. And here he was, shaking in a metal box in the middle of nowhere, with $28 and a fence that was barely started. The voice came back, quieter now, almost gentle. "You're not going to make it. You know that, right? The math doesn't work. It never worked. You were just too stubborn to see it." He closed the toolbox, lay down on the cot. The springs poked through in the same 3 places. He'd stopped noticing weeks ago, outside. The wind picked up. Snow was coming. He could feel it now, that pressure in the air, that weight. If he failed, Lily would know. She'd wait, and then she'd turn 18 and walk out those doors, and there would be nothing waiting for her. No place, no person, just the same nothing everyone had always given her. And she'd learn what he'd learned, that believing in people was just another way to get hurt. His eyes wouldn't close. He stared at the ceiling, counted the patches, counted the seams, counted the nails he'd driven in himself. 18 nails in the first patch, 23 in the second, 41 in the section the storm had torn away. He'd counted them all, knew them by heart, but knowing didn't make the shaking stop. Didn't make the $28 stretch into something that could carry them both through winter. The first snowflake fell sometime after midnight. He didn't see it. He was still staring at the ceiling, counting nails, when the white started to cover everything outside. By morning, an inch of snow lay on the ground. By morning, he'd have to decide buy food or buy wood. He couldn't afford both. He couldn't stand up. He tried. His arms pushed against the cot, his legs tensed. His body refused. Week 8. The snow had been falling for 3 days. The trailer was warm enough the wood stove worked, fed with branches he'd dried by the fire, but he'd stopped eating 2 days ago. The rice was gone. The beans were gone. $9. That's what was left. He lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. Counting nails had stopped working. The numbers just circled in his head now, meaningless. His stomach had stopped hurting yesterday. That worried him more than the pain had. The letter from Lily had come 4 days ago. The caseworker had approved a visit supervised at first. Then, overnight, if the home inspection passed, months of paperwork, background checks, phone calls he'd made from the library, standing in the corner so no one would hear him beg. 1 month. She'd be here in 1 month. He had $9 and an empty stomach, and he couldn't get off the cot. The morning light pushed through the plastic windows. Gray, weak. He watched it move across the floor, inch by inch, marking time he didn't have. Around noon, he made it to sitting. The room spun. He gripped the edge of the cot until it stopped. His boots were by the door. 6 feet away, it might as well have been 6 miles. He stood, his legs buckled. He caught himself on the table, knocking the toolbox to the floor. It hit with a crash that seemed too loud for the small space. He bent to pick it up. The room tilted. He went down. His knees hit first, then his hands, then the side of his face pressed against the cold floorboards. He lay there, breathing, counting to 10. 1, 2, 3. He couldn't remember what came after 3. The floor smelled like mildew and old wood and something else himself. Probably he hadn't washed properly in a week. The pump froze at night now. He had to wait until midday for water. 4, 5. He pushed himself up to his knees. The room stayed mostly steady. The mirror shard he used for shaving sat on the windowsill. He hadn't looked at himself in weeks. He looked now. Hollow. That was the word. Cheekbones sharp under dirty skin. Eyes sunken. Hair matted. A face that belonged to someone begging on a street corner, not someone building a home. He looked away. This was what he'd become. This was what 8 weeks of trying had made him. The toolbox had spilled when it fell. He gathered the contents: screwdrivers, nails, the letters, Lily's first letter. "I believe in you." He held it. Read it again. She didn't believe he'd succeed. She believed he wouldn't give up. Those weren't the same thing. Success meant building the room, passing the inspection, having food in the cupboard when she arrived. Success meant being someone worth visiting. Not giving up just meant not stopping. Even when stopping made more sense, even when the math said quit. He looked at the $9. One bill, 5 ones, 4 quarters. If he bought food, he'd survive another week, maybe 2 if he stretched it. And Lily would come to a room with a bare cot and nothing that said someone wanted you here. If he bought something for her, something small, something that mattered, he'd have nothing left, nothing to eat, nothing to fall back on. The caseworker had been clear. If the home wasn't suitable, they'd cancel. If he couldn't prove he could take care of her, they'd never let her come back. One pillow wouldn't prove anything. But it would be there. In her room. Waiting. He put the money in his pocket, pulled on his boots, opened the door. The cold hit him like a fist. The snow was 6 inches deep now, crusted with ice. His boots broke through with every step. 3 miles to town. He made it half a mile before he fell. His foot caught on something under the snow, a root, a rock. He didn't know. His knee hit first, then his hands, then his face. He lay there. Snow melting against his cheek, mud seeping through his jeans where the ground had thawed beneath the drift. Getting up seemed impossible. The sky was white above him, flat, empty. A truck passed on the distant road. He could hear it but not see it. It didn't slow down. "Just stay here," the voice said. "It's easier. Nobody's watching. Nobody would know." He thought about Lily, the glass partition, her hand pressed flat against it. "I knew you'd come back." That's what she'd written. Not "I hoped." Not "I wished." She knew. She believed something about him that he didn't believe about himself. He pushed himself up. Snow and mud clung to his jacket, his pants, his face. His hands were numb. His knees were wet and cold. He wiped his face with his sleeve and it came away brown. He kept walking. The town looked different in winter, smaller, quieter. Smoke rose from chimneys. A few trucks moved on the main street. Nobody walked. The second-hand store was open. A bell jingled when he pushed the door. Warmth hit him. His body started shaking harder, the cold leaving, the heat rushing in. A woman behind the counter looked up, looked at him, the mud on his face, the snow in his hair, the way his clothes hung off his frame. Looked away. He knew what he looked like. A person you cross the street to avoid. The pillows were in the back, a bin full of them, different sizes, different colors. He sorted through with numb fingers. Blue, light blue, the color of the sky in summer. The color Lily used to say was her favorite, back when they were small enough to have favorites. $7. The tag said $7. He took it to the counter, put down the money. The woman counted it without meeting his eyes. $2 change. He took the coins, put them in his pocket, walking out. He caught his reflection in the window, mud-streaked, thin, holding a light blue pillow against a chest that looked like it hadn't eaten in days. This is what you chose. The library was on the way back. He stopped to write a letter. His hands shook so badly the words came out crooked. "Your room has a pillow now, light blue. I remembered." He addressed the envelope. "Put it in the outgoing mail slot." Mrs. Patterson was at the desk. She watched him walk toward the door. "Hold on." He stopped. She came around the counter, moved slowly, the way older people move when they're carrying something. A paper bag. She held it out. This was left here, for you. He looked at the bag, looked at her. Didn't ask who. Don't know. She pushed it into his hands, went back to her desk. Inside, canned soup, beans, crackers, a jar of peanut butter, enough food for a week. Maybe more. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Someone had seen him. Someone had decided he was worth feeding. He walked home in the dark. The bag was heavy. The pillow kept slipping. His legs barely worked by the end. But he made it. That night, he put the pillow in the corner where Lily's room would be. Set it on the cot. Straightened it until it sat perfectly against the wall. Then he ate, slowly, a can of soup heated on the wood stove. The first real food in 3 days. His hands were still shaking, but something had shifted. He'd chosen to give when he had nothing left. And somehow something had come back. The sound of an engine woke him. Not the wind, not a branch falling. An actual engine, coming down the dirt road. He sat up on the floor. He'd given the cot to Lily's corner 3 days ago, moved it there so her room would have somewhere to sleep. Even before the walls went up, the floorboards were harder than the cot, but that was the point. She'd need somewhere soft. He didn't. 3 days since the food had arrived. 3 days of eating slowly, carefully, making it last. The shaking had stopped. The room didn't tilt anymore when he stood. The truck stopped outside. A door slammed. He pulled on his boots, stepped out into the cold. The old farmer stood at the back of his Ford. Tailgate down. The truck bed was full of wood. Split logs, dry, stacked tight. "Saw you're still here." He nodded. Didn't know what else to do. The old man started unloading. Didn't ask permission. Didn't explain. Just grabbed logs and stacked them against the trailer wall. "I can't pay for this." "Ain't asking." The old man kept stacking. "Had a dead oak come down last spring. Been cured all summer. Taken up space." He stood there for a moment. Then he grabbed a log. Started helping. They worked in silence. The wood was heavy, rough against his palms even through the gloves. His arms burned. His back ached. He kept lifting. When the truck was empty, the wood pile reached the bottom of the window. The old man closed the tailgate, looked at the trailer, looked at him. "That food at the library, that you—" The old man shook his head. "Nope, but this town's small. Folks talk. I didn't ask for— didn't say you did." The old man walked toward the driver's door. Stopped. "You fixed that roof twice now. Fixed it better the second time. Folks noticed." He didn't know what to say. "Fence looks better too." The old man got in the truck, started the engine. "You need work. Come by the Miller place. 2 miles east. Got hay needs stacking, $15 a day." The truck pulled away. Dust and snow swirled behind it. He stood in the cold, looking at the woodpile. 4 days ago, he'd had nothing. No food, no money, no hope. Now he had wood for the winter, canned food in the cupboard, and maybe a way to earn more. He went inside. The trailer was cold. He loaded the wood stove with the new logs, struck a match, watched the flame catch. The dry wood burned clean. No smoke filling the room. No struggling to keep the fire going. Just heat, steady and real. He worked. The wall for Lily's room went up over the next 4 days. He'd found wood behind the collapsed shed-warped boards. Rough cut, but solid enough. He measured twice. Cut once, the way a video had shown him. The first stud went in crooked. He pulled it out, started over. The second stud went in straight. He kept going. 6 studs, a header across the top, cross braces for strength, the hammer didn't slip anymore. His hands knew what to do now. Not perfect, the wall leaned slightly to the left, maybe half an inch over 6 feet, but it stood. It held when he pushed against it. On the 5th day, he walked to the Miller place, 2 miles through snow that was starting to melt. The farmhouse sat on a hill, white with green shutters, smoke rising from the chimney, a barn behind it, red paint fading. The old farmer was already in the barn. Hay bales stacked to the ceiling, more piled in the yard. "Didn't think you'd come." He shrugged. "You said you had work." The old man pointed at the bales outside. "Those need to go inside. Up top. Stack 'em tight so they don't fall." He worked all day. The bales weighed 40 pounds each. He carried them on his shoulder, up the ladder, stacked them the way the old man showed him. His arms shook by noon. His legs wobbled by afternoon. He kept going. When the sun started to set, the old man handed him 3 $5 bills. "Same time tomorrow, if you want." He nodded. Walked home in the dark, $15 in his pocket. The next day, he did it again, and the day after that. By the end of the week, he had $45, enough to buy plywood for the wall, enough to buy hinges for a door, enough to put something aside for food. The letter came on a Tuesday. He'd been checking the post office box every other day, usually empty. This time, a white envelope with the social services stamp. Lily's handwriting on the inside. They approved it. "I can come visit for 2 days next month. The caseworker said if the home inspection passes, I might be able to stay overnight. I can't wait to see what you built. 1 month. I'll be there in 1 month. P.S. The caseworker is sending the bus ticket. I gave them the stop address you sent." He read it standing in the post office, snow melting off his boots onto the floor. 1 month. Lily's room had a frame now, but no walls, no door, no window. He had $45 and a lot of work to do. He walked to Dawson's Hardware. The bell jingled when he opened the door. Mr. Dawson looked up from his newspaper. Did a double take. "You're still at it?" "Yes, sir." "Heard you've been working at Miller's." He nodded. Word traveled fast in a small town. "What do you need?" He pulled out his list. Plywood, door hinges, a handle, weather stripping. Mr. Dawson tallied the prices, scratched something out, wrote again. $32. He counted out the money, stopped. "That's less than it should be." Mr. Dawson shrugged. "Got some old window frames in back. Pulled them from a teardown. They work. Take 'em." "How much are $10 for the lot?" "They're worth more than that." Mr. Dawson looked at him for a long moment. "They're worth what I say they're worth." He paid, loaded the materials into the wheelbarrow he'd borrowed from Miller's. Walking out, he passed 2 men he didn't recognize. One of them nodded. Not a big gesture, just acknowledgement. He nodded back. The walk home took longer with the wheelbarrow. The plywood caught the wind. The window frames clinked against each other. His shoulders burned. But he made it. That night, he installed the first window frame. Real glass, not plastic. He could see through it clearly for the first time since he'd arrived. The moonlight came through different now, sharper, cleaner. He stood in what would be Lily's room. The frame was up, the window was in, the pillow sat on the cot, light blue against gray. 1 month. He had 30 days to finish the walls, hang the door, make this look like somewhere a person could live. 30 days until the caseworker came for the final inspection. 30 days to prove that the kid the system had given up on could build something worth coming home to. He looked at the window, looked at the pillow, looked at the walls he'd raised with his own hands. For the first time, he let himself think the word home. Not shelter, not temporary, Not a place to survive until something better came along. Home. The word felt strange in his head. Foreign. Like a language he'd heard but never learned to speak. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you didn't have to know a language to start learning it. Outside, the snow was melting. The days were getting longer. 1 month. He had work to do. He woke at 4 a.m. The trailer was warm. The wood stove still glowed from last night's fire. Outside, the sky was black. No hint of dawn yet. He got up anyway. Lily's room was finished. He walked through it for the 100th time, checking. The walls stood straight. He'd fixed the lean. Spent 3 days shimming and adjusting until it was right. The door hung on its hinges, opened and closed without scraping. The window let in light. Real light. Not the milky glow of plastic. The cot sat against the far wall, clean sheets, borrowed from the donation bin at the church in town. The light blue pillow at the head, still bright against the gray. He'd swept the floor twice yesterday, swept it again now. The caseworker had come 3 days ago. Walked through with a clipboard, checking boxes, looked at the roof, looked at the walls, looked at the wood stove, the water pump outside, the outhouse he'd rebuilt with a proper door. "It's basic," she'd said, "but it's safe. It's clean. It's more than a lot of kids have." She'd signed the form, handed him a copy, approved for supervised visitation. He'd read those words so many times the paper was soft at the creases. By 5 a.m., he'd made breakfast, oatmeal with the last of the brown sugar he'd bought at the general store, 2 bowls, one for him, one waiting. He ate his standing up, couldn't sit. The bus was supposed to arrive at 8 a.m. The stop was 3 miles away, on the main road at the edge of town. He left at 6, walking in the dark that slowly turned gray. Then pale blue. The snow had mostly melted. Patches still clung to the shadows, to the north sides of trees, but the road was clear. His boots, new ones, bought with money from Miller's farm, didn't leak anymore. He reached the bus stop at 7:15. A bench sat under a small shelter. He didn't sit. The minutes crawled. 7:30. A truck passed, heading into town. The driver waved. He waved back without thinking. 7:45. The sky was bright now. Cold still, but the kind of cold that had sun in it. 7:55. His hands wouldn't stay still. He shoved them in his pockets, took them out, shoved them back. 8 o'clock. No bus. 8:05. His chest tightened. What if it didn't come? What if something had changed? What if she... The sound reached him before he saw it. Engine rumbling, brakes hissing. The bus rounded the corner, white with a blue stripe. County Transit on the side. It stopped. The door opened. She was the only one who got off. 14 years old, taller than he remembered, a backpack over one shoulder, gray and worn at the straps. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a ponytail. She stood on the pavement, looked around, saw him. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she was running, backpack bouncing, arms open. He caught her, held on. She buried her face in his jacket, and he could feel her shaking. Or maybe that was him. He couldn't tell anymore. "You're here," she said into his chest. "You're actually here." "I'm here." She pulled back, looked at his face, studied it like she was checking if he was real. "You look different, older, stronger." They started walking. 3 miles. She asked questions the whole way. "How far is it? Is it cold inside? What does it look like? Did you really fix it yourself?" He answered. Told her about the roof, the storm, the patches. Told her about the well and the pump and the water that ran clear now. Told her about Mr. Dawson and the old farmer and Mrs. Patterson at the library. She listened to everything, asked more questions, listened again. When they came around the last bend, she stopped. The trailer sat in the clearing. Rust still showed on the sides, but the roof was solid. The windows reflected the morning sun. Smoke rose from the chimney he'd banked the fire before he left. That's it? That's it? She walked closer, touched the wall, ran her fingers along the seam where he'd patched the siding. You built this. I fixed it. It was already here. But you made it. She searched for words. You made it like this. He didn't answer. She walked inside. He followed. The warmth hit them both. She stood in the middle of the room, turning slowly, looking at the wood stove, the wooden table, the shelves he'd built from scrap lumber. Then she saw the door. What's that? Your room. She crossed to it, pushed the door open. The window light fell across the cot, the sheets, the pillow, light blue against gray. She stood in the doorway for a long time. You made me a room. It's small. It's mine. She walked in, sat on the cot, touched the pillow. You remembered. Remembered what? Blue. I told you once, when we were little, I said blue was my favorite. He hadn't been sure she'd remember, hadn't been sure he remembered right. Yeah, I remembered. She lay back on the cot, stared at the ceiling. The wood planks he'd sanded smooth so there wouldn't be splinters. When you left that day, she said. At the office, I put my hand on the glass. He leaned against the doorframe. I thought you'd turn around. I thought you'd look back. I couldn't. Why? Because if I looked back, I wouldn't have been able to leave. She was quiet for a moment. The wood stove crackled in the other room. I knew you'd come back, though. He looked at her. Not that day, not even soon, but someday, I knew. How? She sat up, looked at him with eyes that were older than 14. Because you're you. You don't quit, even when everything's against you. He didn't know what to say. You came back, she said. Yeah. You built this. Yeah. For me. He nodded. She stood, walked to him, hugged him again. Gentler this time. Thank you. That night, after dinner, soup and bread. Nothing fancy, she fell asleep in her room. Her room. The words still sounded strange. He stood in the doorway, watching. Moonlight came through the window. The window Mr. Dawson had sold him for $10. It fell across the pillow he'd bought with his last $7. The day he thought he might not survive. She lay there, breathing slow and even, safe, warm, home. He thought about the day he'd signed those papers, the pen that ran dry, the $287 that was supposed to be everything. He thought about the glass partition, her hand pressed flat. His hand matching hers. He thought about what he'd built since then, not just the roof or the walls or the room, something else, something he didn't have a word for yet. Maybe he didn't need a word. He turned, walked to the wooden table, sat down, outside. The wind pushed against the walls. Inside. The fire crackled. In the next room. His sister slept in a bed he'd made for her. He was 18 years old. He had $63 and a trailer that still needed work, and a sister who believed in him. It wasn't much, but it was his. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. There's a quiet weight that settles after a story like this one. Something tender. Something familiar. It sits in the chest and stays for a while. That's all right. It doesn't need to go anywhere just yet. Many of us know what it feels like to build something with nothing, to carry a promise we weren't sure we could keep. Some of us have been the one waiting behind glass, watching someone walk away and trusting they'd return. Some of us have been the one who walked not looking back, not because we didn't care, but because we cared too much to stay. Perhaps you've worked in silence, wondering if anyone noticed. Perhaps you've loved someone without recognition. Perhaps you've held on when every reasonable voice said to let go. These things don't need to be explained. They don't need to be resolved. They're allowed to simply be heavy, tender, yours. Whatever this story stirred in you, it's okay to let it rest now. Not everything asks for an answer. Sometimes a feeling is enough. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end.